President Trump putting the brakes on a massive 50% tariff that was set to hit goods from the European Union next weekend. It threatened to dramatically escalate the trade battle between Trump and European countries. Trump now says that the new tariff will be delayed until July 9th. CNN's Kevin Liptak is covering the story from the White House, and our Claire Sebastian is in London. Kevin, to you first. The president said just a few days ago that he wasn't looking for a deal with Europe. What changed?
Yeah, and it seems to have been this conversation that the president held yesterday with the president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. This was actually the first time that the two leaders had talked since President Trump took office, which is somewhat surprising given all of the trade tensions between the U.S. and the European Union. In this call, they were essentially able to discuss some of the differences between the two sides as these talks proceed. And there are some significant differences. From the European perspective, there is some confusion about what exactly Trump is looking for in order to lift some of these tariffs. U.S. officials have complained that the Europeans aren't bringing them serious enough offers as part of these trade talks. And in this call, Ursula von der Leyen essentially told the president that, yes, she was serious about reaching a trade deal, but that they would need more time, that they would need until July 9th, which is the date that President Trump agreed to. We should say that this is actually the original deadline that President Trump set in order to reach all of these trade deals. That is when that 90-day negotiation period with all of these countries will expire. So essentially the president here saying that he would revert to that original timeline in order to prevent these new tariffs from going into effect.
And Claire, to you, how is the European Union responding?
Well, I think they're treading very carefully, Alex. We see that in the conciliatory tone that came out of that call. Ursula von der Leyen describing it as a good call, saying Europe is ready to advance talks swiftly and decisively, and calling this the most consequential and close trade relationship. I think that's a bit of a shift from the rhetoric we saw from the EU trade chief on Friday, who said that deals should be made with respect and not threats. Because now, even though the timeline has been extended, they have 44 days to try and reach a deal with not a 20% reciprocal tariff, but a 50% reciprocal tariff hanging over them. And I think, as Kevin alluded to, they now have to figure out what exactly to offer the Trump administration to prevent further escalation, because some of the points on the table, these non-tariff barriers that the Trump administration takes issue with, things like value-added tax, digital services tax, those are decided at a national level and will be much harder to agree with member states. Plus, the negotiating problem that the US side has talked about, in the words of Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, the fact that you have these 27 member states in the European Union represented from sort of centrally in Brussels has made negotiating more difficult. That also will not be resolved overnight. So perhaps something involving more investment in the US. President Trump hinted that if someone wanted to come forward and build a plant, they could look at a further delay, perhaps something to reduce that hated $236 billion trade deficit in goods. We don't know at this stage, but the timeline is tight. And while European markets have rebounded somewhat today, I don't think you could call this a full sigh of relief at this point, Alex.
And that is what so much of this is about, what the Trump administration feels like it's being offered in these negotiations. Claire Sebastian in London.
I'm not looking for a deal. I mean, we've set the deal. It's at 50%. Now, if somebody comes in and wants to build a plant here, I can talk to them about a little bit of a delay.
2 days later, a call from the EU Commission president apparently changed all that.
And she asked for an extension on the June 1st date. And she said she wants to get down to serious negotiation. July 9th would be the date. That was the date she requested. Could we move it from June 1st to July 9th? And I agreed to do that.
Joining me now in the group chat, Stephen Collinson, CNN politics senior reporter, Maria Cardona, CNN political commentator and Democratic strategist, and Lindsey Dratz, CEO of the Forward Party and a former campaign finance official for Mitt Romney's presidential campaign. Thank you guys all for being here today. Appreciate it. Okay, Stephen, so you've talked in the past about the tariffs in general. When you look at the state of play, are these reversals? Are these the art of the deal? Is the EU doing better than other countries? You know what I mean? It feels like there's some European leaders that have won his favor. What are you looking at now?
I think there's really total confusion.
My 10 questions didn't convey that?
Yeah, but,
obviously I have a firm grasp.
The argument that this is the art of the deal founders on the fact there hasn't really been any deals yet. There have been discussions about deals or commitments about deals or a commitment with China to talk about a deal. But I think there are increasing concerns about how real all of this is. Ultimately, I think what Trump would like is a tariff of 10%. I think that's what we've seen on most of the deals that have emerged. The problem is it's backwards and forwards, and I think the thing that a European leader probably would take away from the Chinese example, for example, is when the pain is about to kick in, the president steps back. And that seems to be what's happened here.
All right, I have to play a clip of tape from the president because so much of this conversation has been wrapped around the idea of bringing manufacturing back to the U.S. What would that look like? What would that mean? How long would it take? He was asked about it, and here's what he had to say.
We want to make military equipment. We want to make big things. We want to do the AI thing with the computers and the many elements. But the textile, you know, I'm not looking to make T-shirts, to be honest. I'm not looking to make socks. We can do that very well at other locations.
Okay, it's a tie for Lindsay and Maria on facial expressions while that was playing. Lindsay, let me start with you. That's ambitious, and I think that has always driven the U.S. protection of its manufacturing capabilities, military equipment, being competitive. What's going on with what he's saying?
Yeah, it is ambitious, and I think that the American people want to hear that the president is committed to bringing manufacturing jobs, because the American people equate that with middle income jobs. So middle-class job creation equals manufacturing. Unfortunately, it's not realistic. As most of us know, the time horizons to build out the infrastructure to create these manufacturing facilities is not something that's going to happen. Certainly not during this Trump
but if you want to launch a golden age, then this is what you do. No, I'm serious. It's like you have to decide at some point, right? It was like building the highway system. It didn't happen overnight.
Yeah, but you also have to base it on reality and on history and on the knowledge of what the United States is capable of and what other countries are there to do for the United States in terms of trade. This is nothing but chaotic, discombobulated craziness and confusion. And we're seeing it in what not just the tariffs are doing to consumers, but what this back and forth is doing to the markets. Mm-hmm. And you all have CNN has done such a great job, and I'm so proud of the network of focusing on real people's stories. You all have on all the time small businesses, entrepreneurs, people who are, frankly, would be the ones who would benefit if this kind of manufacturing would actually come back to the United States.
But are experiencing the pain right now, which is to your point about other countries saying, well, let's just maybe you put them through it. It's a problem.
Here at home, President Trump has been making a series of statements on tariffs over the weekend and this morning, saying he will delay a 50% tariff on the European Union until July, but still threatening a 25% tariff on Apple and potentially other smartphone companies if they don't start making their phones here in the United States. For more, let's bring in NBC senior White House correspondent Garrett Haake, who joins us live from the White House. Garrett, the president has been very busy this morning with his phone on Truth Social. What's the latest?
Yeah, we've covered the world this morning on the phone this morning, Jonathan, but a big focus on Harvard. But over the weekend, it was this latest threat and walk back by the president that puts the European Union, which is our second largest trading partner after China, now back on the same 90-day deadline as every other nation to strike a trade deal with the U.S. or risk still higher tariffs. Now, the EU welcomed this delay, which gives them more time to negotiate. But the decision by Trump to pause this tariff increase that he only rolled out 2 days prior becomes the latest example of an economic policy made seemingly on the fly, rattling markets, businesses, and consumers.
It's another tariff reversal from President Trump, announcing his 50% tariff on the EU will be delayed by a month from June 1st to July 9th, after his phone call with the European Commission president, whom he says asked him for an extension.
I agreed to do that, and that she said we will rapidly get together and see if we can work something out.
The announcement coming just 2 days after President Trump threatened that new import tax. The president also taking aim at Apple, threatening to impose a 25% tariff on iPhones, urging the company to shift production to the U.S. Analysts say U.S.-made iPhones could cost $1,500 to $3,500, far higher than current prices, and moving production to this country would take years. And the president acknowledging Sunday that even his most punishing tariffs won't bring back all types of manufacturing once done in the U.S.
I'm not looking to make T-shirts, to be honest. I'm not looking to make socks. We can do that very well at other locations. We are looking to do chips and computers and lots of other things.
It all follows the president's controversial commencement address at West Point, delivering a politically charged speech to an apolitical audience. The president boasted about his administration's effort to end diversity programs, reshaping the military to reflect his worldview.
The job of the U.S. Armed Forces is not to host drag shows, to transform foreign cultures, but to spread democracy to everybody around the world at the point of a gun. The military's job is to dominate any foe and annihilate any threat to America.
And mused about marriage while discussing a real estate developer.
He ended up getting a divorce, found a new wife. Could you say a trophy wife? I guess we can say a trophy wife. It didn't work out too well, but that doesn't work out too well.
The president rounds out his Memorial Day weekend with a visit and a wreath laying at Arlington National Cemetery later this morning. He just posted that he will also be making a speech at 11 a.m. and then he spends the rest of the afternoon at his golf course in Virginia. Jonathan?
Delivering a speech at perhaps the most somber sight in the United States, he finished that post by all caps saying, "Enjoy." Not quite sure what he meant by that. But Garrett, you mentioned...
I'll leave that to you, John.
Yeah, you mentioned a few moments ago about how Harvard in particular has been the target of his ire over the weekend. Give us the latest there. Harvard did win in court on Friday, got an injunction, but there's a long way to go in this battle.
Trump is canceling his tariff plans, at least some of them right now. He's delaying them sometimes. He's raising them, lowering them. Who knows exactly what he's doing? But this is part of the issue, and this is why he's getting himself into hot water. For a few reasons. One is his whole plan in the first place. He would obviously be much better off if he just scrapped the whole thing and basically said, we're going to go back to the economic status quo that existed on the day I became president. And we're just going to get rid of all of the tariff stuff. We're going to stop doing them. I have no more plans to do them. We're going to run our trade like Biden did. And maybe he doesn't have to say it like that because it's going to make him look bad, but he should find some way of getting back to that status quo. But if he's not going to do that, the issue is he's creating this instability. Again, because even if you support the tariffs, you can't really support them if you don't know where they'll be. So American businesses that maybe hypothetically could, depending on the industry and their specific circumstance, benefit from the tariffs, they can't benefit because they can't make the investments that the tariffs are based on, or that the tariffs incentivize, because they don't know where they'll be next week, next month, certainly 3 months from now. But it's also a sign that it's showing Trump's weakness, because he's backed down so many times. Not always fully. Sometimes it's more of a delay than a canceling. Sometimes it's a partial canceling. But Trump has canceled tariffs. He's lowered them on China. He's put exemptions in at the last second for fairly significant products. You know, he's done tariffs to Canada and Mexico, and then before we know it, some of those are gone, and he was going to violate his own USMCA deal, his big, beautiful trade deal, and then he said, well, it's not going to affect those things sometimes, and it showed that he is not committed, that he is a playground bully. If you stand up to him, he'll back down.